As you prepare your taxes, are you aware of how you can increase your tax refunds? And there are many scams out there to rob you of your money. Are you one step ahead of these thieves as you ought to be? I'll be joined by a tax attorney in less than a minute to discuss all this. Also in this program, if you are elderly and living at home alone, if it's too much for you and you're considering an elderly care facility, or if you're considering that kind of home away from home for your mom or dad or your brother or sister, you will want to hear what elder care specialist Derek McDonald has to say. Welcome to another edition of Brooklyn 45. The countdown is underway. If you haven't completed your tax preparation as yet, there are things you must know. My guest is tax attorney Maxine Morgan. Welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
That question so many people are asking, how do I increase my tax return funds?
Well, one of the things that we should keep in mind as we are looking forward to preparing our taxes is to maximize tax deductions that are available to us. There are so many tax deductions that people forget about, they overlook. I'll start with one, for example, charitable deductions. So we know that we can deduct cash donations that we make to charitable organizations and deduct things like clothing that we give away, household items that we give away. But another thing that we should include in charitable deductions is mileage. Mileage deductions, mileage driven for going to and from charitable locations, dropping off charitable goods, etc. Another deduction is childcare expenses. We remember the amounts that we pay to people who take care of our children, but do we count things like summer camp, summer day camp in particular? Do we count or remember to deduct after care expenses? Those are things that we should not forget. Another expense is student loan interest deductions. Oftentimes, statements for those expenses don't come in the mail. We have to remember to go online to download them from the lender's website. Another expense is medical expense, but in particular, if one is paying tuition or education expenses for a child who is learning disabled, that expense could be included in medical expenses. Not tuition expenses, but could be included in medical expenses. Another expense is home office. So do you work from home? Do you have a home-based business? Do you work for your employer sometimes at home? Some people telecommute, and you use a dedicated part of your home to do work that pertains to working for your employer, that pertains to your home office business. So that is an opportunity for you to deduct as a business expense, expenses that you're paying anyway, right? You can deduct a part of your utility bill, a part of your rent if you're a renter, a part of your mortgage interest, real estate taxes if you're a homeowner, depreciation on your home. So that's something to not forget.
To not forget.
To not forget to deduct,
Okay.
yes.
Now, talk about the importance of making sure you do not forget. Documenting these things, because lots of people don't document.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So everybody's situation is different. So it's important to speak with your tax professional and to make sure that you're eligible for these expenses. But as you're speaking and consulting with your tax professional, get a checklist. And that's one way to not forget to deduct these items. Mm-hmm. And, have a very close interview with your tax professional. And that's the importance of meeting with your tax professional early, because then the interview will be more thorough and they'll be able to go over these questions with you. And, at that moment, it could really trigger your memory of these expenses.
So you should talk to your tax professional before you begin preparing for the year ahead of you, or just document all of these expenses and then have the discussion with your tax professional?
Actually, both ways. Take advantage of this tax season by speaking with your tax professional early and having a good interview with that person. But then at the same time, you can ask, when would be a good time for me to come in, meet with you, to have a tax planning type of meeting where you're looking forward. We're in 17 and there are opportunities that we can take advantage of for 17, as long as we know that these tax deductions and these tax credits are they're within our reach. But
so it's not too late to talk to your tax professional for deductions for 2016, even though you have not documented them. I mean, they may be there in your head.
Absolutely, absolutely. Take a note as a reminder so that when you meet with your tax professional, you can ask, can I deduct these items? Because a lot of times the expenses have already been incurred,
yes.
But we forget to have that conversation. We forget to bring it up to the tax person, and maybe they don't ask. Yeah.
I understand that there may be some new IRS requirements.
Well, one of the requirements, or I don't know if I should call it a requirement, but there are some changes. And so when you meet with your tax person this year, one of the changes that you might anticipate is that they're going to be asking you for your driver's license or a copy of your driver's license. And that particular change is a new security measure that they have put in place to fight tax-related identity theft. So some of us may have heard of cases of people filing other people's tax returns, right? Pretending to be the other person,
yes.
and claiming that other person's refund. And so when the true taxpayer goes forward to file their tax return, it is at that moment that they suddenly learn that their tax return has been filed already. And so obviously they're confused. So the driver's license ID information that they now require you to include on your tax return should help with that kind of fraud, should definitely cut down with that kind of fraud.
So that's
Yes.
a major change.
Yeah, that is something that's definitely new. Another change that is not necessarily didn't start this year, but started just a year or two ago, is a change regarding reporting on your tax return whether or not you had health insurance coverage for the full year. And if you answer no to that question, there may be a penalty. For a lot of people, there will be a penalty. If your income is below a certain cutoff, then you will be exempt from the penalty. But that is definitely more work. And they're also asking for more due diligence, asking the preparer to answer more questions regarding the claiming of earned income credit, the claiming of the Americans Opportunities credit, which is related to education tax credit. And the reason they're doing that is because a lot of people have claimed the credit when they're not entitled to claim the credit. So there are more checks to go through.
And you said that the person who is going to be disadvantaged financially is the preparer, as opposed to the person who is filing the taxes and presenting the tax information?
No, I'm not saying that. It's the preparer who's going to be, the
okay.
preparer will spend more time.
Oh, okay.
And you may see the fee for the tax return preparation go
Yes.
up a little bit more because there's just more
Right.
obstacles to go through, right?
Yes, of course. You mentioned some scams earlier. What are some of the scams that are that you are aware of as a tax preparer and that you tell your clients and your students We're going to talk about the student part a little later, that they need to be aware of?
Well, there is phishing, right? PHISH.
As opposed to fishing.
Exactly, right. Phishing is one. And so people who intend to commit tax identity fraud try to capture personal information about other people. So you may receive an email with the emailer pretending to be the Internal Revenue Service. And so they really want you to click on the email, open the email, click on a link. And if you do that, you may be granting someone access to your computer so that they can then access your personal information so that they can then take their next step, which is probably to file a fraudulent tax return on your behalf. And so the IRS they do not contact people by email. And so everyone should know that. Everyone should delete such an email and not click on any links. And another thing is that people who intend to extract money from others will call and pretend to be the Internal Revenue Service. And
You've got to be so very careful these days.
absolutely, absolutely, and pressure people to send money to them, right? So they really scare people into thinking that if there's this tax bill out there and if they don't pay right away, then you're going to be facing serious negative legal consequences, and you must go right away and wire this money to them. So the IRS does not contact you in that way. So that's definitely a fraudulent situation.
I understand there are free tax services available this year.
Yes, there are. There usually is. If you go to the Internal Revenue website, you will see a lot of information there. I can share with you that Long Island University, Brooklyn campus, which is near here, offers free tax services. It is an IRS certified program, volunteer income tax assistance program. And that program is ongoing right now. Every Saturday, they meet with taxpayers who would like to have their tax returns prepared for free, and 10 a.m. to 3 p.m.
You're a professor at Long Island University.
I'm a professor at Long Island University, yes.
And you're also a tax accountant.
I'm a tax accountant, yes, and I'm a tax attorney, yes. I'm a professor of business law, by the way.
Oh, okay, congratulations. As a matter of fact, someone said to me just before the program that you're now chairperson of your department.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. The business department, yes.
Okay. You must be very busy.
I am. It's absolutely busy, and it's tax time now, right?
Yes.
So we're in the thick of tax season.
And they tell me you don't have the time for new clients. We have about 30 seconds. What is one more piece of advice that you'd like to give?
Well, we talked about meeting with your tax preparer early, so do that because you can actually avoid losing money by making sure that you get a head start, right? If you start the process early, it means that you won't forget deductions, you won't forget, the tax savings opportunities, and you will have a better consultation with your tax preparer. If you happen to owe money, make sure that you file. Anyway, some people decide, well, I owe money, I'm going to ignore it, it's going to go away. You know that it's not going to go away. Make sure that you file and look into an installment agreement. You will come out ahead doing it that way. If you do not file, then you'll be facing penalties and interest, and it will end up costing you more if you go that route.
That's a word for the wise. Thank you, Maxine Morgan, tax attorney. I said tax accountant earlier, but tax attorney and also a professor at Long Island University. Thank you for being on.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being on Brooklyn 45. Providing care for your elderly mother or father or sibling can be challenging. My guest, Derek McDaniel, knows this only too well. Welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
What are some of the concerns children have when they are considering putting their parents in an elder care facility?
Wow, there are quite a number of them. The first and foremost will always be safety in terms of making sure that their parents are someplace where they're safe, well treated, well cared for. So that would be the first one. The second one is typically how to pay for those services, because elder care can be extremely expensive in this day and age, especially here in the Northeast. So if you're looking at the cost of a private nursing home room, it can be anywhere north of $100,000 a year here in New York. That much. The national average right now for a private nursing home room in America is just over $98,000 in 2015. That's the national average. Here in the Northeast, you're going to add about 20 to 25,000 to that. If you look at the cost of assisted living facilities for a semi-private room, you're looking at just over $50,000 a year, and that's for a semi-private room. Home health care can run you anywhere between $40,000 and $80,000 a year, depending upon exactly what services you get. So these numbers, they get pretty big pretty quick.
How do people pay for this outside of their savings? You talked about some astronomical numbers there just now.
Absolutely, and this is exactly why with elder care you really should plan and get out in front of it, as opposed to being stuck in a situation where it just sort of happens and you become what I call in my book a crisis caregiver. But in terms of how to pay for it, there are several different techniques. First and foremost, you have Medicare, which is essentially the insurance policy for people who are 65 and older in this country. You have Medicaid. Medicaid is for, in general, people who are, let's say, on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum. Then you have things like long-term care insurance. Some people use reverse mortgages. Other people might use long-term care insurance, and there are different variations of that. Then you have some people who use accelerated benefits on their life insurance policies. So there are a number of different techniques that can be used. The key thing, though, is to get out in front and plan for it. So
you said get out in front. What signs should people look for in the person they are considering or they think should go into an elder care facility?
Wow, that's a tough one. Well, first and foremost, you look for someone that needs care. If, let's say, in terms of like different signs, if you're going to visit mom and her house is normally immaculate, but you're starting to see that the house is messy, mail is laying around, maybe she's not cooking for herself the way she used to. Things like that, those are the sort of signs that show you that a person is starting to need care. Now, in terms of when they need to be institutionalized in terms of a facility, that's a little tougher call, and that's usually dictated by a doctor as well as the person's lifestyle and what sort of care they have in their own homes. Because first, and in all cases, people do better when they are allowed to age in place, meaning being able to stay in their community, stay in their own homes, and get older when they're around the things that they know and love. So being put in a home should really be the last case.
From your own experience, which is preferable? I mean, I know we live in a society now where people the kids are working.
Absolutely, yes.
And looking after their parents, that's a bit of a challenge.
It's a huge challenge, actually. Well, my preference would always be to have someone come into the person's home and let them age in place. All of the studies show that people do better. They're happier. They're more comfortable when they're allowed to stay in their own homes. Sometimes, either because it's not safe to keep them in their own homes, and that really should be the driver more than anything else. You want to keep your loved ones safe. So if it's not safe for them to be in their home, then perhaps you start looking at either an assisted living facility or nursing home or what have you. That's the first thing. But in terms of people caring for their loved ones, it's tough. The average caregiver dedicates over 20.3 hours a week to caring for a loved one. And that's someone who is in relatively good health, who's anywhere between 65 and 75. Once you hit 75, that number jumps to 34.6 hours per week. And that's a lot of time. So it's essentially another full-time job. So it's tough.
What happens if the person doesn't want to go to an elder care facility? I was driving the other day, and this car passed me. This car was really moving, and I wondered who's driving that. And I purposely got close to the person and realized, here's a woman who looked as though she was 90 years old. Now, what happens if a person doesn't want to go to an assisted living facility or to an elder care facility?
That's tough. One, you can't really force them. Let's be very clear. You can't force a person who is mentally competent to enter a facility. It may not be the best idea in the world for them to stay out, but they are still adults, and as long as they are mentally competent, you cannot force them into a facility.
Even if they can't look after themselves.
Even if they can't look after themselves. Now, if it gets to the point where they really need care and you can go and have them declared incompetent, then you can make that decision for them. But I want to be very clear, you can't force them otherwise. But now, if they can't live by themselves, then there's always co-location. So perhaps they can move in with one of their children or with another loved one or something of such. You now have people who are groups of elderly people who are co-locating so that they can help care for themselves, which is an interesting phenomenon, actually, because it's sort of the best of both worlds. So it might be 8 or 10 people who are all 65 or older, but they live either together or close by, so they can help take care of each other without burdening their kids. It's, people are getting creative because we do have the baby boomers now who are online. So in America right now, we have on average 10,000 people a day turning 65. And once you hit 65, your new life expectancy is 85, roughly. So a lot of people.
You have a book called The Essential Guide to Caring for Your Loved One and Yourself.
Yes, sir.
Why did you write this book?
I wrote that book because that was me, realistically. By education, I'm an attorney with an MBA, and I was working on Wall Street. My mother was the designated caregiver for my grandmother, and she relocated to New York to care for my grandmother, but God had other plans for her, and so my mom died within 6 weeks of moving to New York. She died unexpectedly, and all of a sudden the mantle of caregiver for my grandmother fell to me. And so the information in this book is essentially the information that I found very, very helpful as I started moving through this process, because as I cared for my grandmother with my schedule and so on and so forth, I realized that I also had to care for myself. But at the time, I was hesitant to do it because I felt guilty taking time away from her to care for myself. And in retrospect, I now understand that by taking time to care for myself, I am, in fact, allowing myself to be better so that I could care for her.
How do people handle these feelings of guilt?
Unfortunately, most people give in to the guilt much the way that I did. And so on a couple of occasions, my grandmother used to live in the Bronx. I live in New Jersey now. There were a couple occasions that, honestly, I fell asleep on my drive home because I'd be at work all day. After work, I'd drive up to her house to make sure that she was okay and she had what she needed and so on and so forth. And then I'd drive back out to my house, usually well after midnight, and I was up again at 5 in the morning to go to work. So after a while, it's just exhausting. So you give in to the guilt.
What's your advice to people who may be going through that?
My advice is much the same as, when they do the safety checks when you get on airplanes and they say that God forbid, the oxygen mask drop down, put the oxygen mask on yourself first, before you put it on the person next to you. Because of my old job, I used to travel all the time, and I used to think that was the most selfish thing in the world. And until I got into this business, and now I understand it. You can't care for the person sitting next to you if you've passed out from oxygen deprivation. And it's the same thing here. You really have to take care of yourself so that you can care for your elderly loved one, because frankly put, if you're in the sick bed next to them, you can't care for them.
Where can I get a copy of this book?
You can get a copy of that book on Amazon, or if you come to my website, MrElderCare101.com, you can order the book from there. So, and on my website, there are numerous videos, podcasts, so on and so forth, that cover everything from caregiving issues, financial management issues, how to pay for elder care. There's even information on there about how to tell when mom and dad are getting to a place where they've become unsafe drivers. So we've got that one.
Yes. Well, Mr. Derek McDaniel,
Yes,
author,
sir.
attorney,
Yes, sir.
and consultant, elder care consultant.
Yes.
Thank you for being on Brooklyn 45.
Well, thank you very much for having me, sir.
You can watch this program on YouTube. We'll also love to hear from you. Post your comments on our Facebook page, Brooklyn 45 TV, or email us at info@brooklyn45.com. That's info@brooklyn45.com. You can see this program and others on our Brooklyn 45 TV YouTube page. On behalf of our entire Brooklyn 45 team, I'm Sam Tate.